You're tuned in for another deep dive, and today we're really venturing into some fascinating territory.
We really are.
We're looking at the connections, the ones weaving together science, religion, and spirituality.
That's a big topic.
Definitely. Think of it as a sort of sifting through the evidence, trying to understand how these, well, often separate worlds actually intersect.
Especially in our basic human quest for meaning, for well-being.
Exactly.
And our main guide for this exploration today is a really insightful article by Marynês Pereira. She's a neurobusiness specialist.
Right, with that interesting background in the corporate world, but also neurocoaching, positive psychology.
And even quantum physics. It gives her really unique lens to look at all this.
It does. And we should definitely state up front, this deep dive is heavily based on her article, Ciencia da Alma, explorando conexión entre cerebro, fe, religión y espiritualidad.
Yes, absolutely. Full credit to Marynês Pereira for that foundational work. We'll mention her again at the end, too.
Good call. What really feels central here, I think, is this growing convergence we're seeing.
You mean between rigorous science and maybe more intuitive or ancestral wisdom?
Yeah, exactly. Like they're all pointing toward similar questions, about purpose, about happiness. It feels urgent somehow.
And we have more tools now, don't we? More ways to explore these connections than ever before.
That's true.
And the sources feeding into this are so diverse. It's really interdisciplinary. You've got neuroscientists looking at the brain basis of faith.
Quantum physicists questioning reality itself.
And science starting to, well, validate practices that are actually ancient.
So our aim today is basically to unpack these emerging links, look at the different angles, neuroscience, theology, psychology, quantum physics.
Quite the range.
Right. And hopefully get everyone listening to maybe reflect a bit personally as we go.
Sounds like a plan. Where should we start? Maybe with the science side of belief.
Yeah, let's do that. The science of belief. It is quite a shift, isn't it? Seeing modern science, which is often seen as, purely material.
Right, starting to investigate these more transcendent parts of human experience.
And there's that one statement that really jumps out from neuroscientist Jordan Grafman.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
God exists. It's in our brain.
Wow. Okay. That's bold.
It is, but it signals some serious scientific work happening behind the scenes.
For sure. Grafman and his collaborators, they've worked with some big names. Northwestern, King's College London, IDOR in Brazil.
So, proper research.
Definitely. And their goal, importantly, isn't to prove or disprove religion or diminish it. It's more about understanding how our brains actually process religious beliefs.
How we handle religious behaviors, experiences.
Exactly. They're trying to map the neural networks involved. Think about that, the brain circuits for faith.
That's kind of mind-bending, like finding the biological spot where spirituality lives.
Sort of, yeah. And they're very aware it's sensitive research, obviously, given all the history and feelings around religion.
Understandably.
But they argue, look, we need a scientific approach to understand this really fundamental part of being human.
So the key is, it's not about validating God, but validating the belief itself, neurologically.
Precisely. Understanding the mechanics of belief within the brain.
It's fascinating how that scientific angle connects with ideas from, well, seemingly very different places.
Absolutely. Take John Lennox. He's a mathematician at Oxford.
Okay, math, logic, proof. How does he connect to faith?
Well, that's what's interesting. He argues very strongly that science and faith are actually compatible.
How does he square that circle?
His view is that God isn't some scientific theory you test in a lab. For him, God is a revealed person, revealed in his view through Jesus Christ.
Okay.
So his point is, science is brilliant at explaining the how, the mechanisms, the physical laws of the universe.
Right, how things work.
But science, by its very definition, can't really tackle the why, the ultimate origin, the purpose behind it all. That's outside the scientific method scope.
So science describes the machine.
But not necessarily the engineer or the reason the machine exists in the first place.
That's a helpful way to think about it. Science gives us process, maybe not ultimate meaning.
Exactly. And it's striking, isn't it, that even someone like Albert Einstein, a giant of science.
Yeah. What did he think?
Well, his famous quote, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind."
Right, I've heard that.
He talked about feeling this profound humility when looking at the order of the cosmos, seeing a kind of superior spirit revealed there.
So for him, they weren't enemies, science and religion.
Not at all. More like complementary ways to grasp reality. The big takeaway from both Lennox and Einstein, I think, is that these highly rational minds saw room for both scientific exploration and a bigger picture understanding that science alone couldn't fully provide.
Which leads us nicely back to Marynês Pereira's idea, right? This concept she calls the integrative era.
Yes, exactly. That's a central theme in her article.
Can you unpack that a bit more? What does she mean by integrative era?
Sure. The idea is that this convergence we're talking about, it's not just about, say, science validating a specific religious idea. It's bigger. It's about fundamentally expanding how we understand life.
Expanding? How so?
By using scientific methods to look at the effectiveness of, say, ancient wisdom practices, exploring those deep connections between mind, body, and spirit.
And the goal is optimizing well-being.
Ultimately, yes, it's about bringing scientific rigor to traditions and insights that have often been seen as purely subjective or spiritual.
And are there specific thinkers who embody this integrative approach for her?
She draws inspiration from several people. Dr. Joe Dispenza, for instance, known for his work on neuroscience and personal change.
Okay.
Amit Goswami, he's a quantum physicist who talks a lot about consciousness.
Right.
And even someone like Edgar Cayce, known for his intuitive insights. The common thread is using tools from neuroscience, epigenetics.
That's how environment affects our genes, right?
Correct. And positive psychology, quantum physics, using all these fields to understand that mind-body connection more deeply, and ultimately the potential of human consciousness.
It feels like we're finally getting the scientific language and tools to investigate things that used to be faith or personal experience.
That's a great way to put it. And that actually makes the distinction between religion and spirituality even more relevant.
Okay, yeah. People often use those interchangeable. What's the key difference we should keep in mind?
Well, generally, religion often involves a set system, dogmas, rituals, institutions. The word itself, religion, kind of implies binding rules or obligations.
It's defined structure.
Exactly. Whereas spirituality tends to be more personal. It's that individual search for connection, for meaning, for something transcendent beyond just the material world.
So religion is maybe a specific path laid out.
While spirituality is more like your internal compass on your own journey.
Got it. That makes sense.
And we're seeing a real trend here, especially with younger people and in more developed nations. Research from places like Pew and Gallup shows it.
What's the trend?
A decline in affiliation with traditional religions, but at the same time, an increase in people identifying as spiritual.
The whole spiritual but not religious phenomenon.
Precisely. People finding that sense of connection, maybe through meditation, yoga, time in nature, rather than through institutional religion.
That's a really interesting shift. Does following either path religion or spirituality actually lead to, measurable benefits?
Well, there's actually a surprising amount of research on this. And yes, studies do suggest links between religious belief or spiritual practices and tangible benefits.
Like what kind of benefits?
Things like lower reported rates of depression and addiction, greater optimism, often stronger social support networks.
Social support makes sense, being part of a community.
Definitely. Also, increased resilience when facing tough times and even adopting healthier habits.
So it seems faith can genuinely be a factor in someone's overall well-being.
The data points that way. It often provides real comfort, a sense of belonging. Professor Kristen Lucan talks about religion as this powerful social force for understanding ourselves and finding stability in an uncertain world.
That community aspect again. Shared values, reference points.
Exactly. It can have a big impact, individually and collectively.
I'm guessing it's not all positive. There must be challenges or downsides, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's complex. The same systems that can inspire incredible kindness and beautiful art. Think of all the religious art through history.
True.
Can also lead to dogmatism, exclusion, conflict, even exploitation. History is, unfortunately, full of examples like religious wars.
A reminder that these are human institutions with potential flaws.
Without a doubt. And even on a personal level, how someone perceives God. Is it a punitive judge or a loving, forgiving presence that can really shape their self-worth and mental health?
That makes sense. Your image of the divine reflects back on you.
And we can't ignore the massive influence of culture and family. Where you're born, who raises you. Gallup data shows this clearly profoundly shapes your religious beliefs, or lack thereof.
So much is ingrained from our upbringing.
Hugely. And interestingly, research even connects religiosity to certain personality traits.
Oh, yeah. Like what? Yeah.
Using the Big Five personality model.
Yeah.
Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism.
Yep.
Studies suggest correlations between higher religiosity and traits like Agreeableness being cooperative, empathetic, and conscientiousness being organized, responsible.
Huh. So maybe certain personality types are just more drawn to religious frameworks?
It's a possibility the research explores. It's fascinating how our own psychology might interact with these bigger belief systems.
Okay, so we've seen the science, the different perspectives, the benefits, the challenges. Where does this leave us? What's the path forward with this idea of integration?
Well, I think the key is that this convergence, this dialogue between science and spirituality, it doesn't offer simple fixes.
No magic answers.
Right. But what it does offer is a much richer and, frankly, necessary conversation. It pushes us beyond those old, simplistic battles, science versus faith.
To embrace the complexity.
Exactly. To see human experience more holistically. That's the real potential here.
And what could realistically emerge from that kind of integration? What are the hopes?
By combining, say, the rigor of scientific methods with the wisdom from ancient traditions and that personal quest for meaning, we might unlock new levels of human potential.
Potential for what, specifically?
For more effective ways to heal, perhaps. Better ways to promote genuine well-being. New paths for personal growth. And maybe even collective development.
Imagine combining brain science insights with practices proven to enhance focus or emotional balance.
Precisely. It really feels like we're just scratching the surface, just beginning to grasp the deep connections between our brain, our consciousness, and, well, whatever term you use for the transcendent or the divine.
So the integrative era that Marynês Pereira talks about, it's really a call to build bridges.
Yes. A call to build bridges between these different ways of knowing and experiencing the world. To explore, with an open mind and maybe a bit of courage, what this union could offer.
The potential seems huge, not just for individuals, but maybe for society, too.
That's the hope. A more conscious, more connected approach to living.
And it comes back to the individual journey, doesn't it? As Marynês reminds us, it's ultimately personal.
It is. But the idea is that by bringing together the best of science and the best of spirituality, we might light up that path a bit better.
Contribute to a future that's, well, more conscious, connected, and maybe truly happier.
That's the vision. And navigating this convergence, making those choices, that's up to each of us.
A powerful thought to end on. And that brings us to the close of this deep dive. We absolutely want to thank Marynês Pereira again. Her article, Ciencia da Alma, Explorando a Conexión entre Cerebro, Fe, Religión y Espiritualidad, was really the backbone of our discussion today.
Absolutely. Her insights were invaluable. And for you, our listener, we'll leave you with just one final thing to mull over. How might digging a bit deeper into either the scientific side or the spiritual side, or maybe both, enrich your own search for meaning and well-being?
Something to think about. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.